At the start of a TV show or a movie, often they have the trope of the new person entering the world. Whether that world is a workplace, a certain culture, a new community, a new school. And the reason why is we, the audience, are also the new girl, the new person entering the world. So it's an easy way for us to then enter this with that fresh perspective and have somebody that's that same stand-in for us. So the other reason why this is so helpful is usually within a community, group, cult, there's a sense of dysfunction that is just, that's just how it is, and that's the status quo, and they don't even realize it's a dysfunction because they're just so immersed in it, and they've been in it for so long they can't see it, they can't recognize it. And so the new person can often be this catalyst for them maybe seeing their own dysfunction, or she'll join the dysfunction in her own way because it's actually the perfect dysfunction that has always worked for her. And what I notice whenever I enter a new job or I move, but specifically jobs, is I am noticing so many things that are happening, but the people that work there are very much like, enter our movie, enter our world, here's how we do it, this is how we do it here. And that makes sense, and that's fine, but there's also not that kind of two-way of also inquiring or having a curiosity about, hey, so since you're kind of got the fresh eyes on our place, what do you see here? Like, are there things that you see that are dysfunctional? Or are you seeing things that are functional? Are you seeing, what are you seeing and how can it help us, right? They don't ask that because people are scared actually of they just assume you join and you learn the way. But they're scared to actually know that. They might think you're observing that, and they may want to push that down by being excessively nice, flattering, or they might do the opposite way, which is kind of really undermining until you get in line, right? And that's because you, as a newcomer, you're almost perceived, just like when the new person comes in the Western, as, oh, are you going to be a threat to us or a liability, or are you going to be a benefit? And so of course they're thinking that. But what I think would be beneficial is making this a more open, two-way conversation, because the new person, once they're integrated, they're not going to even remember these, because in order to survive, especially in a paycheck type of situation, you're going to have to integrate, and you're going to have to like it. And there's a bit of a Stockholm syndrome where you better get along because that's your survival. So you're going to eventually adapt to their way, and that could be dysfunctional. For instance, let's just go really broad. The 9-to-5 paradigm in general, I have been out of that for several years. And when I re-enter it, what I think is, first thing is I'm very antsy sitting that long. My body is like, can we please move? My body is used to, I usually walk on the trail, I usually dance around in general in my house, and I generally I just do a lot of movement throughout the day. And so then suddenly sitting all the time, which there's no secret that sitting causes tons of future chronic diseases, because it's just an extreme of that many hours of sitting is not good for our mind or body. And yet we persist in the 9-to-5 paradigm because it's like adapt to this dysfunction of sitting that long. So that's the first thing, antsy. Wish that it was just part of the culture that of course you move for an hour. Like, it's not a lunch break, it's a workout break. Like, that would be really, and of course you can make your lunch break a workout break and they won't know. So that's how I'm adapting, because it's a shock when you're not used to it, and so that's the first thing. Another thing I notice is that, and this is no surprise, but you don't actually work every 8 hours a day. Like, there's a lot of minutia, like it's not actual productive work is what I'm saying. Like, you're productive the first few hours, and you might have a few like zombie, like administrative task progress in the other hours, but for the most part, an 8-hour day is stretching out the productivity and actually putting you in a drain and a trance. It's not optimizing your best productive hours and efficient hours, and part of this is too because of the sitting and not moving, which it's just a slog, right? So that's the next thing I notice is like, that's a long time. Like, if you get everything done in 4 hours, you should be able to just leave, but it's expected that you just kind of keep going. It's like in the factory, you just keep putting the buttons and some mechanical, except that if you're not doing that factory work, then it's you're supposed to be using your mind and like thinking and writing, but that's just not how it can work. There's got to be some variation to kind of get the mind. Otherwise, if you're doing roboticized tasks anyway, then that's fine. That many hours lends itself. But if it's a creative aspect, there needs to be some oxygen to other parts of your body so that you can kind of refuel if you're going to have those 8 hours. Another thing I noticed is that people, because they're just so accustomed to making 8-hour days, that they create Excel sheets to organize things just because, like just so that they are doing something that's work related, that's stretching out time. And then they'll have a meeting about that Excel document, and it's so weird because it's like extending or stretching out and looking for ways to stretch out time, because you have to be there 8 hours, so you like look for things that stretch out time, which is the opposite of how you live normally. You usually try to you just don't have that idea of time where you're going to do something that's completely useless and inefficient just because you have to be there. So it creates a weird mindset toward, and that's why, and then when everyone's sharing these kinds of documents with you, they find it completely normal, but you're like, oh wow, you're really like stretching out your time to make this, and then over discussing something, it's something roboticized and strange. And the next thing you notice in a 9-to-5 paradigm is immediately the weekend has become that's your time, and then there's the coffee and the alcohol. There's all these little things. There's the little phrases about coffee and alcohol and what'd you do this weekend? What are you going to do this weekend? And suddenly, and then there's like, it's Monday. It's hump day. It's Wednesday. And like you say every day of the week, like, and it feels weird when you've been out of it. You're just like, this is such weird talk. And then you think, you just notice that, people are almost in a script with it, right? And it's fine, but you think there's something a little bit, this community is a little bit, they're not present. They're like on this, they're in a trance even when talking like about time itself and the days. And then there's like all of these very much numbing agents. Caffeine and alcohol are both numbing. They're like that. So it's interesting because you're already in a trance from the repetitive robotic overstretch of time, and then you add substances that actually self-medicate you into even more of a numbed out glaze, and it's like a hypnotic trance. It really is. And when you're on the outside looking in, you're like, this is so weird. Why do we do this? Like, think of yourself as that alien that comes down and it's like, why are people doing this? And you can see it. You can see it when you're not immersed. When you're immersed, it's just normal. So it's so normalized that you couldn't imagine somebody having a remark about how it's so inefficient and odd. Because you're just like, well, that's how it is. And isn't that how, that it's a little microcosm of how everything is with conditioning. Like, we just kind of accept that this is how it is with a lot of things. And the less you do that, the more free you are, because it's just a shame that we haven't revisited the 9-to-5 paradigm when we already know that it was created for factory mechanized jobs like that. And it's also, given the studies we have with sitting and chronic health and chronic disease, given the fact of obesity and all the cardiovascular diseases, so it's odd that we just continue to normalize sitting. And given even the fact that COVID's made remote work normal, but there's still that in person, it's really hard to unwire that really ingrained programming. And it's frustrating because it's so hard to get change in. It's very gradual, but also people, they need to feel like if everybody is doing it, then they just keep doing it. And even people that start businesses, isn't it interesting that even though they're independent, starting their own business, they still make it mandatory as an 8-hour day. You think they don't ever even just think maybe my business, it'll just be 6-hour days with the same salary. They always think time, the hours mean that every hour is the same. It's like, no, you're in a glaze for the last 2 hours. You're like really numbed out. Like, yeah, maybe that's a good time for meetings, but when you're doing that, another form of dysfunction that happens during this is because you spend so many hours with these people, they're almost their opinions and all the grudges and things that you think about them and they think about you consume you, because they're in your life more than anybody else. So their opinion gets caught. You're caught in worrying about people that are really not ongoing people that you should be worried about, but it's just because you spend so much of your time with them. If you just had half days, or at least just less, if more of your time was yours than with them, you'd always retain that sense of you and your family and who you are, what you know. That's what's so, that's why there's weird, people have to go have all this recovery from toxic workplaces, because it's only toxic because actually the paradigm itself lends itself to that, because you're overstretching time, you're sitting, you're stuck with, you're basically like stuck in cells with people, and so it's just a natural reaction to what is essentially, there's already a lot of distortion because you're just in a trance. So a lot of situations you're reading into are just because you may even be, like, people may even just be creating stories in their head or dramas or motivations because they're looking for something to just kind of almost entertain them, because otherwise they're going to stretch out time in another way. But another way to stretch out time is some people just start, making up stories that people are after them, like a paranoia, or sometimes people create dramas and act them out as power plays or act out insecurities. So for me, it's just really, there's a better way, and the new people when they enter can really see that. So it's a shame that it's very much a like, just enter, just go with this world. Just enter this movie, it's normalized, because they always see, and that's why they're such a great character for getting into a speculative fiction or a world building, because they have that perspective. So let's end the 9-to-5, let's rethink it. It's very, very much this roboticized, mechanical way of life. It feels like we've got to have the ability to at least question it and think about change.